Hello, thank you for joining us for Special Report Online. I'm Brett Baer. If this is your first time, welcome aboard. It's a different forum. Continue the conversation with our panel. We want to hear from you, so weigh in with questions or comments. I'll read them. Don't get frustrated if you don't see them. We're putting them in as fast as we can. Our panel, Charles Lane, opinion writer for the Washington Post, Fox News media analyst, host of Fox's Media Buzz, Howard Kurtz, and, of course, syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. Guys, I want to play that Mark Toner soundbite from the State Department today. We didn't get to it in the panel, but they had a tough time answering questions from State Department reporters who, by the way, have been immersed in this subject for a long time, so they know what to ask. And Mark Toner didn't have the best day. Take a look.
I am aware that senior State Department officials, noted in the report, said they wouldn't have approved her exclusive reliance on a personal email to conduct official business. It is our understanding, Arshad, that the full extent of her use of private email was not clear to senior staff. I do know there were hack attempts, but none of them were successful.
How do you know that? Because the report does not say that none of them were successful.
I apologize. Actually, I misspoke.
You know what? Forget that. I didn't. It kept on going. I mean, we could have made that a 5-minute soundbite, Howie. Sometimes it's like that, and you got to explain these things. This overall is a pretty bad report.
Boy, he did not look happy when the spokesman slows down and then is apologizing. Look, obviously, Mark Toner didn't want to throw the former secretary under the bus. At the same time, it's his own department, the independent inspector general, saying that all these rules were flouted. And it's a tough crowd, as you noted, Brett, because you're dealing not with a bunch of reporters who just dropped by and read the summary. You know, people who've been dealing with this email issue, for about a year now. I know a lot of people think this has gotten very old and incremental, but the story is moving forward. And, of course, there's also the question of what the FBI is doing and when the FBI will finish.
By the way, this is why politicians always like to do those local TV station interviews around, because while some of them are very good and they know a lot of things, they're not like steeped in it and seeping with all the little details and knowing, Charles, when the little nuance changes, and that's where the news is.
I think that's a generous way to put it. They usually have no bloody idea what's going on. They have a question written down, and they have no follow-up.
I was being generous to my
yes, you were.
Affiliate colleagues.
And that's why I'm here, to correct you when you're overly generous, because I'm not. It's not in my nature. I thought when, the interview that you had with Brian was a very pointed one. He had a good style. He never looked alarmed or surprised. And then every time you asked him a question, he'd say, well, there are 14 aspects to that question. I'll deal with one each at a time. And he's extremely successful at making it boring. So if you're not steeped in the details, it's not that you aren't engaged. You're just not interested at that point because you don't understand the nuances. And I think that's the problem with making this a story. If you watch the Trump attack on it, did you hear what he said? IG report, not good.
Weren't so good.
That's
not
it.
So good.
He didn't get in the weeds.
He didn't. He didn't get in the same zip code. He was just saying not good because I'm not sure he could explain it, and that's. But it does, as you say, it has a cumulative effect. People know this is not right. I mean, his dealing with it, I think, is correct. Not good is probably enough because people know she wasn't honest in explaining it. She hasn't been open about what the details were, but everybody is waiting for the report from FBI.
But that may take forever.
It could take till after the election, for all we know.
The power of this IG report is in that it had new stuff in it, right? If you're somebody like Hillary in a predicament like this, what you're praying for is nothing new, right? That it will kind of just go over the same old ground. And that reminds me of where the power of the FBI report or whatever may lie, even if she's not indicted, right? Because, and again, I'm making the presumption that whatever they do, the FBI will have to produce some kind of a report for all this taxpayer money and personnel that they've been devoting to it. And there might even be new stuff in that even if there's not an indictment, it refutes the stories that she's been telling. I mean, that's what was so difficult for Hillary in today's news, is that there were direct refutations on a couple of points of things that she's been insisting on out on the campaign trail, especially, as Charles pointed out, the personal convenience line, the business about how it doesn't matter because all my official emails were contained in these other emails that were recycled. And, you know, there's really no way to get around that.
But I'm telling you, it's like they don't believe we have videotape. You know, because it's like it didn't happen. Mike Harmon 200 writes in, have the mainstream media ever been bored by a Republican scandal? That's a good question, I guess. I think what's tough.
But this one lacks sex.
Yeah.
That's probably why it's not.
So far.
So far, yeah. Wait until it expands, perhaps. You know, it's much like the Benghazi story, where in order to fully get it, you have to tell the whole story. And every time you do that, it takes, 5-6 minutes to get into the nuance of the problems before, during, and after the attack, and where it was, lacking, and what exactly she said and what she didn't do. The Clinton people talked about that testimony, Howie, as a triumph for her in the Benghazi hearing. There are some people who follow it closely who tell me that was not a triumph, and some of the things that she said in there, may be problematic in this final Benghazi report.
Right, but how many Americans sit through the entire 11 hours? And
well, that's the deal.
And you had a lot of congressmen who were kind of showing off and not really landing any blows. I will say this, I do think there's one bipartisan aspect to the press's approach to scandal, and that is if it is a complicated scandal and it goes on for some months and you get into that sort of incremental period, we do get bored. And as a journalist, as a writer, speaking on TV, writing a column, you do have to explain why this new development, you have to both write for people who have been following it intensely and for people who haven't been following it casually, if at all, and that can get you wrapped up in your words. I will remind people that it was the New York Times that originally broke this email story, so it's not like the liberal media are giving Hillary Clinton a complete pass. But it
did stem from the Benghazi Committee's original request.
It was the Washington Post that got the leak of this IG report first, if I may.
You may
throw
that in. I mean, there's kind of you were talking about how difficult it's been to pin Hillary down or whatever. I sort of feel like early on, their political assessment of the risk involved in this was based on what they thought it could do to her in the primary, right?
Yeah.
And they found that to be a very low-risk situation.
Oh, in part because Bernie Sanders didn't want to make it
Bernie didn't want to make an issue, number one, and heck, we were going to beat Bernie like a drum anyway. He had no chance. And sort of like that second part of that proposition has kind of gone away. And furthermore, Bernie has found ways to get on her honest and trustworthy issue without contradicting himself about the email. And so that whole, they said a bunch of things, and she said a bunch of things early on that she thought she could kind of get away with politically because she was going through an easy primary. And now that has not panned out.
SBKK agrees with you. Bernie Sanders has no credibility when he won't go after Clinton on this. I guess he's really just part of the establishment after all. Let's see. Jake the Goose says, Brett, why do you assume your audience cannot handle a story that takes 5-6 minutes to tell? For many of us, maybe the wonks, we enjoy in-depth reporting. And Jake the Goose, you get it here. It's one of the only places that we delve into the weeds. I mean, we're in the weeds so much. Yeah. We need a weed whacker. We do it on healthcare, on Obamacare, on Benghazi, on all these stories, in-depth stories that you don't see anyplace else on Special Report. I want to play this soundbite. Hillary turned in everything. We have that one, Phil? Okay.
What we turned over were more than 30,000 emails that I assumed were already in the government system, Brett, because they were sent to state.gov addresses.
Sure, but there were some that were just recently discovered and turned over.
No, that was in the State Department, not in me. Okay. I've turned over everything. We turned over everything that was work-related, every single thing. Personal stuff, we did not. I had no obligation to do so and did not.
Okay, that's not what the IG report says. They said they didn't get everything right away. And then do we have toner today from that that soundbite when he talks about what they didn't have. Toner Today 26. We'll play it in a second. Bottom line, when you play these things, it's not what they're saying was the real fact, and that's a problem for her.
It is a problem, but I think you can show these, and perhaps it would work in a 30-second ad, I can imagine. But I don't think that you have to. The details are not what's interesting. It's not exactly a Nixonian scandal about a break-in. This is about simply somebody who didn't want to go by the rules, excessively paranoid and secretive, and did something exceedingly stupid. Because why did she do any of this in the first place? She had not been accused of anything. It was a preemptive move, so she could have her term done behind closed doors. Nobody would see what she said. The idea that you would risk all this and all of the revelations, it's always the cover-up and not the crime. This has been a year spent on the cover-up. I mean, she hadn't even committed a crime, so to speak, at the beginning. She hadn't even entered office and decided she would have a private server, not to go by the rules, break the law according to the IG, and she'd brave it out. And she did this knowing she's going to run for president. If she weren't going to run for president and all this had been imposed on her, it might have made sense, but it made no sense the way she's done it.
All right, the other thing is what we talked about earlier, Howie, is the one email that really caught our eye was about this conversation she had that she wanted to keep her personal emails private, not able to be searched or FOIA'd, Freedom of Information request. And today at the State Department, Mark Toner was asked, why was that email not in the ones that you released and you were forced to release by the judge to the press? Here's what he said.
It wasn't part of that tranche of emails that she turned over. And if I explained that poorly, I apologize. There are other emails out there, and she has said that she only turned over what she still had in her possession. So that does not exclude the fact that there are other responses, replies. You know how email works, where there is the body of an email from her that was not reflected in the amount of emails she turned over.
I mean, the crazy part is how they said they turned over everything, that they were putting it out in big swaths, tranches of emails, and they were giving reporters everything as ordered by the judge. The one email, or at least the several emails in that they don't put out, is the one that says, I don't want to put my personal stuff out. That's the reason I'm doing a personal server.
And if that's not a smoking gun, it certainly involves some smoke. What continues to come back to bite Hillary Clinton are these sweeping statements she made in the early months after this was disclosed, released everything that was relevant, and no classified information. So then you have the drip, 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 which is what the press feeds on, of saying, well, this part isn't true, and this part is contradicted, and so forth. And I think part of the reason was not just that she wasn't pressed by Bernie Sanders, that Hillary Clinton, was not willing to admit that this is a mistake. Remember all those months she wouldn't apologize, and finally she felt compelled to apologize. She just felt that this was something that her detractors were fixated on. The public didn't care about it, and I think the honesty numbers show that, at least in a broad sense, the public does care about whether she's being straight about this.
Well, do you think that if any of us on this panel had handled classified material like we know the facts as we know them, that she handled classified material, that we would not face some penalty?
You're asking?
Yeah, I'm asking you as a person.
The literal answer is I don't know, because I don't know the law well enough. But I would say this, that Hillary has one legal advantage, is that she's a classifying authority. As Secretary of State, a member of the,
and that's what she tried to tell me, is that.
Yeah, but it happens to be true. I mean, it may just be the case that she can't be prosecuted because of that.
But that's what she's putting out, but not what she's receiving. I mean, if she gets an email, as she did, allegedly, that has a name of a CIA asset in a certain country, and obviously, knowing she's Secretary of State, she's been a senator, she's been First Lady, she knows that that's classified, even if it doesn't say top secret on the top and bottom.
Right.
She knows that.
Right, and what are you saying she did with that then?
She forwarded it on
to somebody who was cleared to see it, or she sent it to the New York Times? I mean, if she sent it to the New York Times, that's a problem. If she forwarded it to somebody who was cleared to see it, I don't see the problem.
She kept it in a personal server, which is, I think, illegal, and she also forwarded it in a way that you shouldn't do if the information is
I don't know. I don't know. And keeping it on a server is
You
illegal.
asked me what I would, at this point, I'd be now complaining about prison food. That's what I'd be. I'd be writing letters to the warden to ask for an improvement.
Part of the problem with this as a scandal is that even though the entire thing was totally inappropriate and wrong, it might all have been legal. It might all have been legal.
I don't think it was legal. I mean, negligence.
I just don't. I mean, you look at other people. You look at David Petraeus. You look at this ambassador in Kenya.
Petraeus lied to the FBI. That's what got him in trouble. That was different. And can I just throw in one?
But the handling of classified information is something that this administration went after numerous times.
Yeah, and I agree about that. I just want to throw in one thing, since we're talking about this in the context of the campaign. We are, as we should, going over this in microscopic detail.
It's the online show.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump told a series of pretty loud howlers to our newspaper today about this phony fundraiser he threw in Iowa, where he claimed to raise $6 million for vets, and it doesn't seem like anybody knows where that money is. He said he gave $1 million, which nobody has ever gotten. He told several different stories to our reporter. His staff told several different stories to our reporter. And I just want to put that out on the table, because the situation in America right now is we have two people running for president. And
well, his honest and trustworthy numbers are upside down as well. But two things on this story. One, he didn't have to raise any money for the vets. He did. He's given some money, and some veterans groups have said that he has given money in the hundreds of thousands, if not the millions. He says that he was vetting the veterans groups.
Which is not true. Because
that's what he says.
He had previously given that same group a lot of money.
The third thing is that he wasn't Secretary of State dealing with classified information that possibly put national security at risk.
No, he was trying to be president and standing up in front of the whole people, trying to be a good guy and claiming that he liked veterans.
And skipping our debate.
Yes. The real difference. Most importantly, skipping the Fox debate.
If lying to the American people was a prosecutable offense, our prisons would be groaning with politicians. That's the difference. Hillary, we've shown in those tapes, a dozen times has said stuff that wasn't true. That is not why she's being.
How many times has Donald Trump on tape said things that aren't true?
I'm just saying that there's a difference between speaking officially to the FBI or report to the IG, doing things with classified material that is, I believe, illegal. That comes under the rubric of the criminal law or even civil law.
But the press repeatedly points out. Sorry, Charles.
You're saying speaking untruthfully in public is not prosecutable offense.
Otherwise, she could have gone to jail for the Bosnian sniper.
But it's prosecutable in the court of political and public opinion. Correct. And the press has repeatedly tried to call Donald Trump on misleading, untrue, and contradictory statements. He has a way of diffusing it, as we saw with the Pocahontas comment and so forth, that Hillary Clinton lacks. If she had that, she would be a much better.
Listen, I pressed him the last time I interviewed him about the Iraq statements that he's made, that he's always been against the Iraq War. Right. I mean, he clearly had statements that he was supporting the operation at the beginning. And, he just plows through them and says, I was a businessman talking on a radio show.
He has something going for him that Hillary does not, which is a passionate base of supporters who, it's not that they don't care about these things, in some ways they nullify them, right? And that gives him tremendous power and support when he, fudges, to put it politely. Hillary, on the other hand, nobody's passionate about her. Not even the people, it seems, who are supporting her are doing it out of a sense of passion. I think that's her
There's an excitement gap.
Yeah.
The one undeniably truthful thing she said in this entire campaign, I found it actually endearing, which is about the only time she's ever endeared herself to me, is when she said, I don't have the political skills of my husband. She doesn't have the political skills of an ordinary, city councilor. And that is her problem. Trump has an aura. He's extremely glib. He knows how to distract, how to change subjects, and to do it in a way that sometimes is charming, like the Pocahontas stuff, or at least kind of roguish, like her husband. She doesn't have an ounce of that in her.
Willie On says, wrong, Chuck. Your reporter finally admitted Trump gave $3.1 million.
No, I'd like to see his source on that. That's not what I read in today's paper.
Is that issue a problem for him at all? I mean, does it even cross anything when he gets out there and says, "I'm giving millions to vets groups, but the millions are short of the 6 million he originally says"? I mean, he obviously inflates numbers. He has inflated polls. He's inflated calls after victories.
Look, I think it's an issue, but obviously I'm in the minority. I thought it was such an issue starting from the very beginning of the campaign that he wouldn't have a chance, that he would be knocked out early because of all of the contradictions, exaggerations, untruths he's told, and then sort of going into more lately into the twilight zone of conspiracy theories, Kennedy assassination, Vince Foster, all that stuff, to me, was almost instantly disqualifying. Clearly, I got it wrong. That's not how a large number of Americans see it. We'll see whether it's going to have an effect with independents and Democrats. But it surely hasn't had a major effect among Republicans, or he wouldn't be the presumptive nominee right now.
People are, in answer to your question, Brett, I think people are not voting for Trump because in an instrumental sense, which is related to sort of how they view his alleged veracity. People are voting for him, I think, because they see him as somebody with the power and the independence to shake up the system, and a system they believe is even rottener than however rotten he may be accused of being. And that is, in a way I said it earlier, I think that's his ace in the hole. When any of these controversies come up, he just says, but you see, they're going after me because it's the establishment defending its prerogatives.
Right, and a lot of his fans view it as nitpicking, and they sort of grade him on a different kind of curve because they say he's not a politician, so occasionally he misspeaks, and that's okay because we know he will fight for us. He has the aura that tends to reduce the kind of things that journalists ask questions about to a sideshow. And then by the time we're on it, by the next day, he's made news on something else, and we're all chasing that.
And look at the shiny thing. But let's go back to Clinton for a second. Gio from Texas says, Charles, you couldn't be more wrong about the classification of the material and the system it is on. The information is classified, irrelevant from whom or with whom it was shared. If I kept my own server for non-secure email while serving in the Army, I'd be in jail. Executive branch rules. I do think that there is something to the server itself being set up and holding classified material outside of the government-approved classified system. I think he's right.
Yes, the server is a problem. However, we have to take seriously this idea that some of the information was classified retrospectively. I'm just not
2,100 emails, or
well, I'm just not in possession of enough facts to tell you how many of those things were. The rules say that she has to know that those things are classified, right, ahead of time.
I mean, it just gives such.
If she is getting and transmitting information about stuff that was told to an American or to her by a high official in another government, that is classified at birth. Everybody who's in the system knows that.
Yes.
That's not complicated.
It's not a Reuters story that got put on a folder that was top secret.
So there are at least 22. And 22 is enough to put you in jail.
Right, and you think it's a huge threat to this. I mean, I understand about her veracity. Huge threat to the security of our republic that the talking points for her meeting with some guy, with some British prime minister, which are routinely classified.
No, but the name of an asset who's undercover in a country that nobody knows about is on an email that allegedly Guccifer gets into. We don't know that for sure.
We don't know that for sure.
But we know that there, according to this IG report, that there were several attempts, at least, to hack. They had to shut it down 3 times.
The fundamental problem, in my mind, with this thing all along has been that she set up an off-the-books server. That's
and
bad
the
enough.
reason was not convenience. It was transparency.
I completely agree with all that. Don't get me wrong about that. I'm not excusing that.
Which shows intent to go around the system.
Yes, but
so if you link that to classified material being on the server, one would think that the FBI connects dots and says there's a problem here.
Again, if she knew and intended to have classified information moving through that server, right? I mean, that's the missing point that they're going to have.
No, it wasn't intended from the beginning. She and her husband had been through a dozen investigations of innumerable scandals, semi-scandals, and pseudo-scandals. What they learned from that is once she gets to a new position, like Secretary of State, where she could be in charge, they want to minimize anything that can be released or found. In other words, she hadn't done anything wrong, but she insisted on having an off-the-books system because she anticipated at some point for something there could be an investigation. She wanted to be invisible, unreachable, under her control, and destroyable. And half of the emails were destroyed. That's why she did it.
Ponce says it's Gucci fur, as in the designer. Play on words. Got it.
That's what I've made that mistake. Here's my problem I see, which is if the Justice Department.
But how do we know it's not Guccifer?
I think
as in Lucifer.
Well, they're playing on it, but I think he said it in that 60 Minutes interview.
In this campaign, we've gone from Lucifer to Guccifer. Lucifer being the John Boehner rap on Ted Cruz. If the Justice Department decides that whatever mistakes Hillary Clinton may have made, it does not rise to the level of a criminal offense. Now that we are beyond the age of special prosecutors, I think a lot of Americans are going to say, well, it's a Democratic administration. They're letting the Democratic nominee off the hook. There will not be confidence in it. That is not a reason to indict her, but it will say something about public confidence in the law enforcement system.
Here is Judge Napolitano. This report is damning to Mrs. Clinton. I suspect much of it, if not all of it, is already known to the FBI. It rejects her argument that the use of a private server was allowed. The report makes clear that it was not allowed and that she did not seek permission to use it, nor did she inform the FBI, which tutored her on the lawful care of state secrets, nor her own State Department IT folks for the use of her private server. The "it was allowed" statement is an argument she has made many times, as we played that soundbite. This says it wasn't, and she told no one. That's a problem.
Yes.
And that's pretty simple.
That was the news in this that was so damaging to her.
And the news was that email from them saying that she did it
one of
for
the pieces,
transparency.
one of the pieces of news that was so bad.
All right, let's go to the campaign trail. Are we getting ready to see an Elizabeth Warren vice presidential pick? She is on the attack more than she's ever been against Trump. She had a Twitter tirade. Now she has these videos. She was out today again. And, you know, Bernie Sanders is not letting up. And ideologically, obviously, Elizabeth Warren lines up with Bernie Sanders.
She is very skilled at sort of turning the knife and doing it with a bit of wit and humor in a way that Hillary Clinton can't seem to do. But I don't see her getting the BP nod, and here's why. First of all, 2 women on the ticket. Some people say, well, you know, Clinton Gore did it in '92. I'm not sure that Hillary Clinton needs that. Secondly, 2 people of more advanced age as opposed to a younger, more dynamic candidate. But finally, it seems to me that there would be an entire debate about what does Elizabeth Warren know about foreign policy? Is she qualified to step into the Oval Office if anything happened to Hillary Clinton? The Pocahontas controversy would come up again, and that could be distracting and not helpful for Hillary Clinton, who's running on experience. She's picking a first-term senator.
What do you
I think
Charles?
there are 2 compelling reasons why she should be on. Number one, she automatically enlists and co-ops the Bernie constituency. She is Bernie on fire. Secondly, I think she has shown that she can take on Trump, wants to. I mean, it's the classic attack dog position of the number 2. But the reason she won't be on, I think, is because Hillary would not want her on despite those 2 advantages, because she would overshadow Hillary. And she can't be overshadowed. This is her moment. She escaped the shadow of her husband, who's begun to fade, and is essentially out of the picture as a co-president or anything like that. It's not like...
He's going to be running the economy, Charles.
I mean, yeah, it'd be lucky. We'd padding around in a bathrobe, although is how I see him.
I thought Sherrod Brown from Ohio was a better pick, but then Harry Reid came out and said he really doesn't want any people being chosen with a Republican governor who can replace the senator with a Republican, which they're trying to obviously take back the Senate.
Well, what's more important, the White House or the Senate? That's kind of
Harry Reid always thinks it's the Senate. The angst and concern in Democratic circles seems to be rising, doesn't it? I mean, this whole drama over Debbie Wasserman Schultz is very revealing. And what's stunning to me is that, you know, this whole thing began with Hillary as part of the Clinton machine, and she's inevitable, and she controls the party, and so on and so forth. They are now appeasing the Bernie people, right? There's serious talk that they're going to throw Debbie Wasserman Schultz under the bus to appease the Bernie people. They're letting him include, Cornel West on the Democratic Platform Writing Committee. They are in full appeasement mode of what they regard to be the Bernie troops that they desperately need in November.
Party unification.
And yet, Bernie refuses to be appeased. He's coming on stronger and more angry with each passing day. And this is turning into, it's interesting because, the Republicans are divided and so on, but they've had a couple of weeks where at least they were pretending to be united, and that whole issue was kind of out of the picture. Now the focus is clearly on these very sharp differences within the Democratic camp, and Bernie being angrier and angrier and less compromising every day.
That's why I'm saying Elizabeth Warren moved up the ranks as a possible VP.
She certainly moved up the ranks.
She moved up the ranks. Okay, we're going to leave it there because we're wrapping up. Thank you. If you haven't been to Special Report Online before, glad to have you. Panel, thank you. A little goodbye. We'll see you next Wednesday.